and one man is destined to play many parts. William Shakespeare was born in 1564 in Stratford-upon-Avon, outside of London. Now, he wrote 37 plays and over 154 sonnets, and he invented over 1,700 words that are still used today, such as insane, frugal, gloomy, break the ice, catch a cold, fair play, naked truth, and amazement, and critic. So all these words that we regard as just normal English language actually were invented by William Shakespeare in his time. He moved to London and established his career as a playwright and a dramatist between the years of 1587 and 1590. Now, outside of the city, which was Bankside in this area, there was no curfew, so people had to transport from Bankside to the city of London to get back in by certain times, which meant that the theaters were usually performed during the daylight hours, so people had time to make that commute. The South Bank of London, which is this area, which mainly all of the theaters were in, was somewhat disreputable. It was filled with alehouses, many brothels, which were known as stews at the time, theaters, and bowls. Also on the South Bank of London, prostitutes were everywhere. There's brothels and prostitutes, which were known as Winchester geese. And Shakespeare actually refers to these Winchester geese in some of his plays. The area that I'm in right now was known as Liberty of the Clink back in William Shakespeare's time. It's mainly known for Clink Prison, which was one of the worst prisons in London. This area was shady, disreputable, and filthy, filled with pickpockets and street urchins, and it was a very, very poor area. So you can imagine the streets filled around here just filled with inspiration from William Shakespeare when he was trying to pick out characters or interesting aspects of his characters in many of his Shakespeare plays. Here's Shakespeare's Globe Theatre. It's not the real Globe Theatre, as the Globe Theatre has been built 2 different times. The original one was built by Lord Chamberlain's men, which was a traveling acting group, which Shakespeare was a part of for the majority of his career in London. It was built in 1599 on the South Bank, on the suburb of Southern. The actors on the stage wore huge, elaborate costumes. They put most of the funding from the Globe into these costumes. As an actor, you had maybe a few of your lines written down on a piece of paper, and then you would memorize them. You never got the full script or the full storyline. So there was a lot of mistakes made when acting on the stage, as you didn't know the other person's line before you, and after you only knew yours. Now, Shakespeare wrote 37 different plays. Majority of them were performed here at the Globe Theatre, as well as another theater in Blackfriars, and then a few at the Rose Theatre, which is just around the corner from here. In 1592, Shakespeare was finally established as an actual playwright and an actor here in London. Many of his plays around this time were Titus and Andronicus, as well as The Taming of the Shrew. In 1594 to 1596, his lyrical masterpieces were written, such as A Midsummer Night's Dream and Romeo and Juliet. And between 1600 and 1608, his great tragedies were written, which we well know of Hamlet, Othello, Macbeth, and The Twelfth Night. Now in 1603, plague, it racked the entire city of London, killing hundreds and thousands of people. The Globe Theatre actually had to close down for a whole year, as well as many of the other theatres in the area. However, Shakespeare kept writing his plays, and between the years 1604 to 1616, the rest of his plays were performed. In 1613, though, during the performance of Henry VIII, a fire burned down the Globe Theatre, and so it had to be rebuilt by 1614. Southern Cathedral, also known as St. Saviour's Cathedral, was built between 1106 to 1897. William Shakespeare was a regular communicant at this cathedral, and his brother Edmund lies in crypt here, who died probably from the plague. There's also a memorial of William Shakespeare inside the cathedral. Now, William Shakespeare died in 1616, but it wasn't until 1623, 7 years after his death, that his plays were actually published. Up until then, none of his plays had been published. They had only been performed in the theaters around the South Bank, such as the Globe, Blackfriars, and the Rose Theatre. Now, his plays were published as the First Folio, which consisted of 36 of his plays. Now, he wrote 37 plays, but one of them was not included in this First Folio of his works. His plays and his sonnets are legendary and theater, and literature. He created 1,700 new words and phrases that we still use today in the English language. So William Shakespeare made a huge impact on his life just in his years here in London. He's regarded as a legendary playwright whose plays are still being performed some 400 years later.